closed. And I'm going to stop the share. Our next item is we have John Heath, who is coming to speak to us on SB 9 and SB 10, which just got out of appropriations and will be going into the Senate in June. John currently serves as the executive director of the New Light Economic Development, a nonprofit affordable housing development and property management firm based in South Los Angeles. He's responsible for the development, management, and or finance of over 1,400 affordable rental units and more than 500 million of completed real estate projects. His professional career spans 33 years and includes substantial experience as an electrical engineer, attorney, real estate developer, and broker. He's a community organizer and currently serves on the board of directors of United Homeowners Association, a nonprofit mutual benefit corporation he co-founded in 2016. So I'm going to turn this over to him. I'm going to bring him in to be a panelist. I saw him in the audience. John, welcome. And I just put you into panelist and speaker. And you have the ability to share content if you need.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks, Alix. Hi, everybody. Hope everyone's doing great. I will try to keep this as brief as possible. Alix, I appreciate that lengthy introduction. I didn't know you were going to go through my whole resume like that, but it is what it is. Suffice to say, when my professional career started, I actually had hair. I'm happy to be spending a few minutes with our neighbors in Venice. I remember going to Venice as a young kid, riding my bike out there. I used to be a skateboarder, and I know about the guys from Dogtown. Those used to be my heroes and idols that I tried to keep up with. Suffice to say, I'm sure Venice has changed a bit since I was last over there. I know you all are familiar with the issues much more than I am. If you all don't mind, rather than me droning on and on about some corny legislative measures, I'd like to share my screen and just share a little bit of video with you if I can. Alix, I don't think I can. Looks like sharing isn't enabled.
Nope, you should be able to share. I turned mine off.
All right, let me give it a shot. There we go.
There you go.
California faces a housing showdown. Two bills working through the legislature in Sacramento threaten every single family home in the state. They eliminate local zoning and permit unchecked development anywhere and everywhere. We all know California needs more affordable housing. In the guise of solving that problem, Bills SB 9 and SB 10 tear down existing homes and apartments for market rate replacements that cost even more. Under SB 9, developers can buy a lot, split it in two, and build two houses on each half. One house becomes four. The same developer can do it again, and other developers can too. No limit, no control. Under SB 10, developers can demolish a house and put up a 10-unit apartment in its place. With no obligation to upgrade gas, water, sewers, and power, what's in the ground right now will have to support 4 to 10 times as many people. With setbacks reduced to 4 feet, we lose shade trees and yards to absorb precious rainfall. Who benefits from this devastating change? Developers, sure, but behind them are Wall Street banks and hedge funds, buying houses, warehousing property, pressing the legislature for unchecked development. Lawmakers hear their voices. Now they need to hear ours. California needs more affordable housing, but there's a way to do it right. There are hundreds of miles of commercial corridors with existing infrastructure, near transportation, ripe for housing development with economies of scale. With imagination, California can build the future it needs without destroying the communities we have. United Neighbors speaks for what's distinctive in every community. Join us to tell Sacramento no on SB 9 and SB 10.
So thank you for bearing with me with that. That video was produced by our neighbors. United Homeowners Association, of which I'm president, represents Windsor Hills, View Park, and View Heights, which, as most of you probably know, is a neighborhood in unincorporated LA County adjacent to the Crenshaw District. If you're driving south on La Cienega and you pass by the Inglewood oil field, we're just on the other side of that. So UHA is an affiliate of United Neighbors, and we're a statewide coalition of folks that came together because we got tired of seeing these same bad policy ideas coming out of Sacramento year after year, where, you know, as the video says, we all recognize that affordable housing is a critical requirement and something that we all need. And, you know, certainly with Venice being overrun by not only affordable housing issues and gentrification, but also homelessness. I know you guys are aware of that. But of course, the tendency is, you know, some people say never let a good crisis go to waste. You have bills like SB 9, which, just to summarize, would completely eliminate CEQA review for what's being marketed as a duplex bill, but in reality, it's a bill that's basically going to obliterate single family neighborhoods throughout California. No local planning input. What you guys do here at your local land use planning commission would have no input or feedback. And the worst part about it is no affordability requirements. So you're doing all this, you're bypassing the fact that there's some public land, there's obviously some more commercial land, there's a lot of commercial land that's zoned now to accommodate more residential density that's not being used. You know, motels, like our neighborhood has 3 motels that I can think of that could be used to house folks on a transitional or homeless basis. I'm sure you guys probably have some similar properties where you are. You bypass all of that and go straight to single family neighborhoods, but then you don't require any affordability. I don't want to beat this horse to death, but let's just take a quick look here. Back when I worked for the city of LA, I did land use legislative and regulatory policy. So I used to read these bills for a living. So you read the text, this is SB 9. The only thing you see that refers to affordability is a couple of statements where it says, okay, well, we're not going to require, if you have existing affordable housing or housing that's subject to rent control, you know, you're not going to be able to tear that down. Okay, well, that's good. And then there's another reference to that here. But there's nothing that says, well, whatever you build needs to be affordable. There's a vague, sorry, I'm trying to scroll as fast as I can here. There's a vague statement at the bottom of the bill. The legislature finds and declares that ensuring access to affordable housing is a matter of statewide concern and not a municipal affair, blah, 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 blah. So, okay, that's a nice finding, but where are the requirements that whatever gets built be affordable? It would seem that the folks who are propagating these theories about increasing density and just creating more housing units without any kind of affordability requirements subscribe to the old supply side trickle-down economic theory that one of our former presidents was fairly famous for. I think that theory's been debunked, and you know, most of the experts that I've heard talk about this are pretty clear that you just create more housing units without any affordability requirements. You're just going to get more of the same, more expensive housing units, and we continue to have our affordable housing crisis. The other thing I want to point out, of course, representing a historic African-American, predominantly African-American community of, yes, single-family homeowners, but we also have quite a few, you know, duplexes, triplexes, and small apartment buildings around our community. We're very concerned about the issues, the economic issues that are at play here, very serious, specifically displacement of existing residents, homeowners, et cetera, and basically converting, you know, what's now neighborhoods that are predominantly Black and brown homeowners into renters. And if you take a look at, I'm going to share with you guys a couple more quick things here. This is a letter from the LA Urban League from our friend Michael Lawson.
I don't see this. Sorry to interrupt you, John. I don't see anything changing on the screen. Are you sharing the correct window?
Yeah, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm glad you said that. I am so used to sharing my screen that I've got away from. Here we go. How about that?
Yes, we can see it.
Great, thanks. And thank you for pointing that out. So real fast, the Urban League of Los Angeles has pointed out that SB 9, you know, would get rid of single family homes in single family zoning. And here's the key point. What's going to happen is this is not something that these provisions are not built like the ADUs, for example. You know, you can make an argument that an existing homeowner will really benefit from being able to build a separate unit, but how many regular, you know, homeowners are going to build a 4-unit or even under SB 10, the 10-unit apartment buildings? This is really designed for institutional equity and large real estate players to take advantage of. So you've got a situation where developers and folks that have lots of capital already are just going to come in and take advantage of our community and other South LA communities where the land prices are cheaper than they are on the west side and elsewhere, without any affordability requirements. So you get more, you know, market rate overpriced apartments, and you have real economic transformation. And you know, from where I sit, you know, again, we clearly, all of us, I think on this call will agree that we've got to do something. And there are some very good things pending that we should get behind and support. For example, ACA 2, which is a constitutional amendment that would do away with Article 34 of the California Constitution that requires a public vote every time you have a so-called public housing project. That's something that is definitely a remnant of racist white supremacist policy from the early 50s when folks wanted to keep public housing projects out of certain neighborhoods. So if you want to talk about exclusionary zoning and exclusionary housing policy, that's one that needs to be dealt with. We're in the middle of a housing crisis, and we still have something on the books from 70 years ago that requires a public vote whenever we have a public housing project. Just let that sink in. But you know, bad ideas like SB 9 and SB 10, that's definitely not the way to get this done. If I can switch back here and just show you guys a couple other things, hopefully you can see that map. This is a map, and actually it's from a couple years ago, so it's probably changed a bit, but these dots represent single family properties that have been acquired by, you guys remember the housing crisis and the foreclosure crisis in 2008. Well, this is a map showing single family and the concentration of single family properties in South LA, East LA. Notice the west side is pretty clear that you get to the valley. So what you have here is the financialization and institutionalization of the single family housing market in Los Angeles. And folks have started to do studies on this where they're showing that, you know, essentially, this person here has a whole thesis that says financial institutions constructed oligopolies focused on maximizing returns on rent and passing the risks on their return along to tenants, minimizing their own upkeep costs. I've got a firsthand example of this, a house around the corner from where I'm sitting right now on Mullen. Some neighbors told us was, you know, squatters were there and all kind of bad stuff was going on. Well, it turns out one of these, you know, Wall Street vulture capitalist institutions had bought this property, were not maintaining it, had evicted somebody, and just let folks come in and do whatever they wanted to do. So, you know, again, if we're not careful, and if we fall into this trap of just kind of grabbing, we all recognize we're in a crisis. We know we need to do something. What I would argue what we need to do is be smart about our policy decisions, recognize that we cannot keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect different results. I know that, you know, the folks that are listening, and Alix, you and your fellow board members are all good people. You guys are all well-intentioned. We may not all agree on, you know, specific policy ideas, but we have to, I think, recognize that the key to solving this problem is coming together and really collaborating, not being afraid to have some real debate, discussion, and get down and dirty with the things that need to get done to fix these problems. Because otherwise, if we just sit back and allow our legislators to be driven by these folks that have lots of money and lots of lobbyists to push these policies, and then we're sitting here as volunteers, you know, on a Thursday night trying to respond to all this, it's going to be a battle that we lose. So I guess I'd like to kind of pause right there and maybe see if anybody has questions or comments. I could keep both my grandfathers were preachers, so I can talk for a long time, but I like to listen to other folks and, you know, invite some dissenting ideas, and also just invite everybody who's listening to join and affiliate with United Neighbors, because one of the key points that we recognized earlier is you can't just be against something. You have to be able to say what you're for. So if you want to fix affordable housing, you have to be able to sit down and start analyzing solutions. One of the main things that we recognize is that in addition to, or just not focusing on supply side theories, but looking at the demand side, there are a couple of key things. One is, how many vacant units are there in Los Angeles and in Los Angeles County? I'm pretty sure there's at least 100,000. I mean, the real answer is nobody knows, because neither the city nor the county has accurate data to be able to say exactly what units are vacant, what populations they serve, and how to connect the needy tenant with the open unit. So that's one big problem right there. And then there's the other question of Section 8 and other vouchers that assist people to find affordable housing, paying a landlord a market rent, but allowing the tenant, the voucher holder, to just pay their fair share based on their economic ability. You guys all, I'm sure you know and have listened to the news, there's a backup there's a glut of applicants trying to get vouchers. There's a backup of people that are holding vouchers, waiting for housing. We've got to figure out more efficient ways to do this, folks, because we're losing this battle. Michael, I see your hand is up.
I see, Mikhail, before I put you, I see there's someone from the audience in there, so I want to give her a question. And I'm going to turn over Ali Bean to ask you a question, then Mikhail. And John noted on I think it's AC2, sort of repealing an item in 34. I personally have a different point of view about that, but we can talk about that later. I personally feel it would be very detrimental to Venice. But anyway, Ali.
Thank you so much, John, for sharing all of that with us. I've been very worried about these bills, and we've been meeting because we're about to do a new local coastal program, as you probably know, here in Venice. And they've been going community by community, and we've been meeting with the planning department. We've had like 5 meetings with them. And when you say that we can get down and dirty, I would love to know how, because I'm getting the feeling that they're blowing us off. I won't lie. I'm getting the feeling they are yes, 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 yes. And they're not listening to anything that we're in our concerns at all. So I'm wondering, how do you get down and dirty? I would love to get down and dirty about this issue.
Yeah,
I'm very worried about it.
I hear you. And I wish I had, the magic solution to that. But one thing I will say, and after a few years of working on these issues, I'm sure, everybody who's been involved in organizing can share a similar story. You kind of realize tactics that are effective and, what works and what gets attention and what doesn't. Obviously, the ideal situation is, you're able to engage with the public policy maker, office holder, or whatever, whatever body you're trying to affect, and have a conversation, lay out your points and kind of have an intelligent discussion, debate, or whatever, and, figure out if there are any common points that you can deal with. That's the idealistic version. Obviously we don't live in an idealistic, optimal world. So sometimes when I say getting down and dirty, I'm thinking about my late great Morehouse brother, the Honorable Maynard Jackson, who served as mayor of Atlanta and gave a great presentation back in 2003 when I was still practicing law full-time here in Los Angeles, where he talked about things that worked in Atlanta when they started transforming public housing projects into mixed income communities and bringing folks of all different income levels together to create community. And he talked about, I think the term he used is wading through the public fire and brimstone. These are not comfortable conversations. People are very emotional and passionate about their particular views. But at the end of the day, you have to be willing to have those conversations. And, we listen to this on cable news all the time, where people are saying, we're not talking to each other, and, we're not listening, and, we're at an impasse. And really, what are we talking about? Nobody's going anywhere. We're all neighbors, and we got to figure this out. So, yes, it may be uncomfortable. Yes, some people may get their feelings hurt, but we need to find more ways for us, we the people, to get our collective voices heard. Now, I don't know if that means you kick in the door of their conference room and sit on their conference table until they pay attention to you. But, we've seen a lot in the last year and a half in terms of public display of protest, for lack of a better word, and it's gotten a lot of attention. And there are a lot of ways to get attention, But again, at the end of the day, once you have that attention, you have to be able to say, what are we doing? You know, what's the problem that we need to solve, and what are some viable paths to solve it? And then have that conversation and see what you come up with.
John, I'm going to put this over to first Mikhail, then Margaret Malloy, then Barry Casilli, and
Alex,
then
go ahead and
Cindy
finish the
Chamber.
public. I think finish with the public, and then we'll do board discussion. I think that makes more sense.
Okay, great. Margaret.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Margaret.
Hi, John, and thank you for the presentation. I have a question about preservation and integrity of communities of color who seem to hit it from every which end. So in Venice, I'm sure you know, we have the historic Oakwood neighborhood. It's been assaulted over the last 20 years by a conversion of multi-unit buildings to McMansions. And now there's a land use plan that proposes to use Oakwood for 4-story high-rise. So there's no intensification of development proposed anywhere else in Venice, really, except Oakwood. So, you know, just destroying a community from every angle at all times, 21st, you know, 2021 and 1917, you know, just endlessly. So do you have anything to say to these good people who have a little policy inclination? Like, can you just speak a little truth, please? Because they need to be straightened out, or we all need to be helped, but we need to not do this over and over again to one community.
Right, right. Thank you, Margaret. You know, I'm remiss for not even mentioning Oakwood in my opening comments, but obviously, you know, that's a manifestation of what we were talking about as far as, you know, focusing development and displacement and gentrification on really what's perceived to be the lowest hanging fruit. You know, communities of color, you know, oftentimes are just the most vulnerable for any number of historic, institutionalized reasons. And it really is a statement about where we are as a society. You know, we're sitting here, all of us in the good old United States of America, that was originally owned by somebody that doesn't look like anybody I see on the screen. And I was recently at a meeting of another organization that shall remain nameless, but you know, everybody was pleasantly coming on and talking about, oh, I'm coming to you from ceded Tongva, Gabrielino, Keach land, and you know, talking about all the native people. But you know, where are they? They're gone. They've been destroyed. Their whole civilization was destroyed. And you know, we have the audacity to sit here and act like we're honoring them and their culture. But how many Native American nations have we sat down with and talked to about trying to build affordable housing there? So it really becomes a question of a lot of people I think have said, show me your budget and I'll show you what it is you really believe in. So, you know, we as a society, again, you know, we're doing a lot of talk now, right? About we have a housing crisis and this, that, and the other. But you look at the cost to build 1 unit of affordable housing, which is ridiculous, which to me says you have a whole system of folks, many of whom are in my profession, by the way, because I'm in the real estate business, okay? They have created a situation where, you know, maybe through not all their fault, but, you know, it is what it is. This system basically is getting a lot of people rich off of the demand for homeless, permanent supportive housing, affordable housing. And meanwhile, we as a society are not getting what we need. And you guys in Oakwood are in a situation where, you know, what was once a proud African-American community of homeowners is being destroyed. So the real question is, what are our values as a society? What do we value as Americans and as neighbors? And do we really adhere to the concept of I am my brother and sister's keeper? You know, if we do, then we better get our act together and start implementing policies and finding ways to work together that are a lot better and more effective than what we've been doing. Otherwise, we're going to keep seeing the same thing, and that trend is going to intensify. So, you know, that's a long-winded way of responding to that, but hopefully that that was something useful.
Robin. Robin.
Hi, thank you. John, that was Such a helpful, excellent presentation. And I just kept finding so many of the points you said being so true. And to address what Margaret just said, she's absolutely right. And in fact, I just recently went with friends to an open house of one of these just grotesque monsters behind a tall wall in Oakwood, when all of the rest of the block, this is on Palms near Lincoln, it's like small homes with open front yards. So I think, and okay, so initially what I wanted to address was that there's just such deception. And when you talk about that this is this profit-making industry that is pretending to be trying, saying that they're going to be building low-income housing, I think it is completely a sham. And I really think that we need to be looking at everything with that kind of questioning eye, because I really feel like this is just a profit industry that's at work. But I want to also bring this, LUPC back to a concept that has always been important to me in Venice, and I think is like important throughout everywhere. And that is, we need to get the front fences down again, because we've lost community. Neighbors don't know one another. They pretend that they think they're going to be safer by putting up a tall wall. But what they're doing is they're destroying community. And the law is on the books to have 42 inches the maximum of front fences. So again, maybe it's something for the next LUPC committee to take on, but maybe that's a way we can also try to get our community back, get people knowing one another, open it up. And, again, I'm all about open space and green space. And that might be one little way that's going to, there's always been a lot of complaint about it from some people, but, it is on the books and maybe we can use that. So just one thing I bring up, but we also have to be very cautious with all these pretend low-income housing projects. I don't believe that. Thank you.
Two quick things in response to Robin. One is, when she started describing fences, I'm reminded of a certain former president that was very enamored with building walls, build the wall, etc. That there, I remember my wife has traveled to South Africa. I have not had that pleasure yet, but I look forward to it. One of the distinct things that she told me about was the number of homes there in exclusive areas that have these high fences around them with barbed wire. So, again, what you're spending your resources and your money on, the way you relate to your neighbors. We have this thing in our neighborhood where people speak to each other, and folks that are relatively new to the neighborhood sometimes, I guess, are caught off guard by that. And everybody's, there's always cultural differences, and we get that and we respect that. But, again, we're all here on this same planet, folks, and we're all inhabitants of the same city, maybe different parts, but, we're all Angelenos. So, building fences, and, we have from time to time people in our meetings that start talking about crime, and maybe we should try to gate off the community. And we've got like 20 different entrances to our neighborhood. So, I mean, it just from a practical engineering standpoint, that would never work. So, you can never wall yourself off and be safe. I mean, the real safety comes in being part of a community, as the former speaker just said. And then another point real fast, again, just about people power. Our elected officials, they need to really hear from us and understand that they are accountable to us, not the special interests that, so many of them benefit from, and independent expenditures, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a dynamic, I think, that has really affected, assaulted, and mutated our politics here in Los Angeles to a point where I'm very concerned now that it's going to take a big push by those of us at the grassroots who are concerned and passionate about these issues to come together and really look at what can we do to change this and to get things back to where, take the money out of politics, or figure out a way to make our voices loud enough to counteract that. So, I don't want you guys to think I'm a politician, because I'm not. I have absolutely no interest and will never run for any public office. What I do have an interest in is changing this dynamic so that people, our people, the people on this call, my neighbors, your neighbors, can have our issues heard and responded to by elected officials. So that's a key point. Who's next?
Thanks, John. There are two more hands up from our audience, and then I'm going to turn it over to the committee. Cindy Chambers.
Great. Thank you. Thanks so much. I don't want to take up a lot of time, John. I feel so lucky that I'm attending tonight and got to hear your presentation because it is absolutely very powerful. I completely, I value what you shared with us, appreciate and wholeheartedly agree with you. And my question is going to be really brief, and it's a great segue from the point that you just made. And so my question is, would you be willing to share your contact information with us? Because I absolutely agree that it takes all of us working together to create this kind of change. And I would hate for you to leave tonight. I'm so glad that you came and shared all this information with us. And I would hate for you to leave tonight and we never got to connect with you again. And so my question is just asking that. I'm looking, Alix, on the agenda and I don't see the contact information.
You know, I'm always mindful of that, but if you reach out to me on the LUPC email, I will put you in contact with John.
Okay, great. And if there's any way that maybe you can share that information for everyone so that anyone who doesn't have email right now or doesn't have access to it before we conclude this evening, that would be really helpful. Thanks,
John,
John,
you can
so much.
decide how you'd like to handle.
Absolutely. Thanks, Alix. I appreciate that. And thank you, Cindy, for the, the compliment and the comment. I'm easy to find, those of us that have practiced law or worked as licensed real estate brokers. Basically, if you just Google John Heath in Los Angeles, you'll find all my probably more contact information that I want. But in terms of me professionally, you can find me at, well, two things, unitedneighbors.net. I definitely encourage everybody to go there. That has a more detailed analytical breakdown on SB 9 and 10, and we'll tell you about what we're doing collectively on that issue. And then UHA, United Homeowners Association, if you go to UHA1979.org, or if you just look up Windsor Hills View Park, you'll find us, and you can email that info@uhvp.org. And that email will find me, or you can email me directly at jheath, that's JHEATH @UHAWH for Windsor Hills, VP for viewpark.org.
Thank you, John. And
Thanks.
one last question from caller ending in 850. Caller ending in 850. I don't know who this is, but
They unmuted, so
you're unmuted.
maybe they don't know.
Caller 850.
Hit *6 again because you just remuted yourself. There you go.
There you go.
Uh-oh, maybe they're muted and they don't realize it. We can't.
Well, they
we
look
can't-
like they're unmuted, but
we can't hear you.
screen, but we can't hear you.
I feel like a radio DJ. Caller, we can't hear you.
You just muted yourself again, 850. There you go. You're unmuted. You should be able to speak. No? You're definitely unmuted. We're gonna have to move on, unfortunately. I don't know if you can hear us.
Yeah, it sounds like maybe they're accidentally hitting *9 and raising their hand because it sounds like they're muting and unmuting. And
Yeah, they keep muting and unmuting, but we can't hear them.
Yep. All right, caller.
All right, well, I'm closing public questions on this and opening this up to our board. It's going to be Mikhail first, then Barry, then Daff, then possibly myself and anyone else who would like to speak. Mikhail. Mikhail, there you are.
There he is.
So thanks for the presentation, John. So you addressed state bills. How do you see the local, either the city jurisdiction's role in this, and then also to like our level? Like we have a Venice specific plan that has spelled out zoning and density and stuff like that. How do you see the role of local government in regulating this? And that's my first question.
Yeah, great question, Mikhail. It needs to be done better. I know you're referring to TOC, transit oriented communities, and the whole, adding density and giving developers incentives for building projects that have affordability close to transit, which oftentimes, unfortunately, turns into big buildings that have lots of market rate units and a few affordable units. So right now, I think, if I remember the city controller's most recent report, he said that for every 1 unit of affordable housing, we're building 3 units or 4 units of market. That equation's got to be flipped. I mean, we've got to really prioritize and figure out a way to supercharge the production of affordable housing units at all income levels, not just for homeless folks in terms of transitional housing, shelters, et cetera, and not just for very low or low income folks at 30, 40, 50% of area median income. But, what about the teachers, firefighters, police, and folks that we all, talk about and love to, laud when we need their services, but they have to go move to, wherever, 50 miles away from the city because they can't find affordable housing that they can either buy or rent. So, we've got to find better ways to, and really we just, again, as a society, we've got to find ways to allocate our resources, and we have to apply pressure to these folks that have the power of the pen to say, look, we're not going to allow you to move forward with these budgets and green light these projects unless there's at least, whatever the mix is, right? And this is where the importance of local control and groups like yours on the ground that really know what each community needs. We were talking about Oakwood earlier. There are some smart people that know exactly what each one of these communities really needs. And those are the people that need to be at the table and in those conversations. So, we need to bring these land use planning decisions out from these back smoke-filled rooms, where the developer and the policymakers are having those conversations and really have more of that, the dynamic give and take that's going to lead to some different results.
And so just to follow up on that, so like these TOC projects, because those are like the local ones that are usually targeted on commercial corridors, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, isn't that's sort of one of the gists I got from your presentation, was that's the way to go? The issue is just that there are not enough affordable housing.
Well, yeah, I think, it's like, even, we all need water, right? But too much water can actually kill you if you drink too much of it. So if we're building, if we're producing too many market rate units, the way I see things right now, we really have a glut of market rate units. We don't even know what the vacancies are because nobody's able to keep track of that data. But, I'm pretty sure we've got, at least 100,000 vacant units, and we've got 60,000 homeless people that we know of, probably more than that. But, something's out of whack. And again, if we just keep doing the TOC thing, I understand, when Measure JJJ or whatever it was got adopted by the voters, there was a lot of discussion, back and forth about whether it was a good idea. But it's all in how you execute it. If you're in a community like mine where you have single family, but then you go down the hill and you get closer to the commercial corridor, well, those neighbors over there are going to be very concerned because already, their street parking is being affected because people are, pulling into the residential neighborhood to park and then go catch Uber or go to whatever building they're going to on the commercial corridor. So, again, the infrastructure part of this and just the land use planning and making it so that you identify the need, you collaborate with all the key stakeholders and you come up with the best possible solution. That's what's not happening. What's happening is the developers are going in, throwing together these ideas and basically levering up these buildings to be as big and as dense as they can, because without redevelopment agencies and any other way to subsidize the cost of building housing and so forth, you can't, land certainly isn't cheap. So, the cost of land isn't going down. The cost of construction is what it is. So there's only a few variables that you can change to, buy down the cost of renting or owning a housing unit. So we've got to.
But isn't that variable density?
That's one of them, right? But again, the problem is that the balance is it's lopsided. The market rate units are being produced at a 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 ratio. And right now we need that to flip, right? Because we need affordable units. So that's the key question is,
so how do you thread that needle? Because the affordable industrial complex has created this pay to play system. I mean, I guess how do you do that?
Well, we again, it all comes back. There's no easy answers, folks. It all comes back to us, at this level. As I say, all politics is local. I'm a firm believer that the more of us that really seriously come together, and engage, obviously we're going to have differences of opinion. That's fine. But if we can just agree on some basic fundamentals and ways to move forward on that basis and start engaging our public officials and saying, look, here's what, we've had a conversation about this and here's what we want. We want you to figure out a way to identify and unleash some more tax increment financing where you're taking advantage of, the incremental difference in property tax each year. That's what used to go into funding redevelopment agencies before some prior office holder thought it would be a good idea to wipe them out. And that was our biggest engine of affordable housing production. So, again, there's a lot of vacant units. There's a lot of people talk about, building housing from the ground up. There's an awful lot of older housing stock that just needs, some lead paint abatement and some energy efficiency improvements, and maybe some solar panels and some energy efficient windows and, some other things that we can not only create more housing with, we can put some people to work and we can start remaking these communities and making them, more habitable for our neighbors. So, it's not just, I guess my answer is yes, there are ways to make the TOC program work better and we should look at that, but it's not just, and it can't just be about, we can't build our way out of this on the supply side. You got to look at how to be more efficient across the board and do more on the demand side as well.
I don't want to monopolize the time, so please move on. Thanks.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Mikhail.
it.
John, so just before I turn you over to Barry, we have a big concern in Venice sometimes when we hear affordable housing because of the glut of permanent supportive housing projects that we're having come into Venice. It's been a big issue. It's part of the reason not all of us, but a lot of us have concerns about repealing Prop 34. Do you want to maybe just before you go to Barry quickly address the difference between affordable and permanent supportive, because they're two very different things, and sometimes there's a lack of clarity on that. Thanks.
Sure. And I'm certainly not the expert, Alix, but I'll give it a shot. Affordable housing, it really is in the eye of the beholder because people say these terms. You'll hear people say affordable housing, workforce housing, permanent supportive housing, and nobody can really explain what the difference is. When I say affordable housing, I'm thinking, generally speaking, about housing that's targeting folks in the 40%, 50%, 60% of area median income. Just to give you an idea, for our 40% studio apartments over on Figueroa Street, the income limit for one person, I believe, is $29,000 or $31,000 a year, just to give you an idea. And the maximum rent on a studio apartment that you can charge at 40% of area median income is right around $800, including utilities. So that gives you an idea of, when we say affordable housing that's financed by a combination of public subsidy, because all those projects have some sort of financing that comes from the city, usually through the federal government from HUD, and also low-income housing tax credits. When you talk about permanent supportive housing, which has kind of become the new nom du jour that Alix and others are talking about and trying to figure out how to deploy. It's kind of interesting because you really get a hodgepodge of a variety of different agencies, County Department of Mental Health, all kind of agencies from the city, county, and state that have different pots of money to service different populations. And developers that do permanent supportive housing get real good at cobbling all these different baskets of money together. And really, all of us have to do that, no matter what type of project, to make it work these days. But you're basically targeting populations that can afford to pay almost no rent, right? People that are currently homeless or just transitioning from a state of being homeless and may have different health issues that they need ongoing supportive services for, hence the name permanent supportive housing. So you have folks that are, out on the street right now. And again, knowing history is always the key to figuring out how to fix these problems. If you look back at the history of the status or the state of mental health services in the state of California, I believe that started to unravel sometime in the 60s when then Governor Reagan decided to start dismantling mental health services in California. And then of course took that to the national scene when he became president. And, now 30 years later, 40 years later, we have what we're dealing with now, and really what you guys are dealing with in a very specific way. So, this is a crisis that was a long time in the making. It didn't happen overnight. It's going to take some time and a lot of concentrated effort and resources to fix it. Obviously, there is a need for permanent supportive housing that can house folks that have a need for affordable units, that has the treatment services and the support services. Veterans, another prime example, folks that have served our country above and beyond, and, come home and for whatever reason, they're homeless. That's not cool. So, figuring out the balance is key. We don't want a whole neighborhood of just permanent supportive housing. And in some cases, I think, I can't think of any good examples right now, but I know there are people that are looking at mixing different populations together so that you don't just have, again, segregated classes and groups of people. And you can hopefully, just by having people have some sense of normalcy, and being part of a community, maybe get them back to some kind of balance. But I don't know if that provided the explanation you were looking for or not.
No, it
Elise.
helps. I'm going to turn this to Barry and to Daph, and then we're going to move on to our projects. Barry.
Hi, John. Thank you for your presentation. This is Barry. There's a lot I'd like to say about your presentation, but I think I'll focus on just one aspect of it. And that was the video you showed at the beginning. We saw at the beginning of the video sort of a montage of a very suburban style neighborhood with exclusively single family homes and, nothing else. I'm sure there was commercial somewhere nearby, but it wasn't in that neighborhood. There were no apartment buildings. There were only single family homes. You said you used to be a skateboarder and you've been to Venice a bunch. So I'm sure you've noticed that original montage does not remotely resemble Venice. Venice historically is a neighborhood where you have a very eclectic neighborhood where you have apartment buildings, some of them very large, 4 and 5 stories is not uncommon. A lot of mid-sized buildings of 2 to 4 units and a lot of single family homes. And I could not help but be struck by the fact that the video you were showing, by the time it was had progression through to what was, it looked like the point was supposed to be, this would be horrible. The community that was shown looked a lot like Venice. There was what looked to me like diversity of housing styles. There were still single family homes. There were medium-sized buildings, and there were some slightly larger buildings. I'm on a street right now where across the street from me, there's a 16-unit building on a 2,700 square foot lot. And right next door to it is a single family home. That's the complexion of the neighborhood. People love it. That's Venice. So I don't really know how to react to where you were going with that video, because to me, one of the things that makes Venice successful is our housing diversity, which I feel like leads to population diversity. It allows for a variety of income levels. Obviously, only some people can afford single family homes. Only some people can afford large single family homes. A lot more people can afford apartments. Even a lot more can afford smaller apartments. What's happened in Venice is the allowance for multi-unit construction, for apartments, for smaller apartments has been eliminated over time by downzoning. The only thing you can build in Venice right now basically is large single family homes. You can do some TOC, but you can't do TOC west of Lincoln. You cannot build apartment buildings or real multi-unit buildings in the neighborhoods where you could, in the neighborhoods that define Venice. The area in Venice that was this by the beach was R5 originally. Now it's single family zoning. All the area west of Abbot Kinney was R4. That's also single family zoning. Oakwood, which we were just talking about, was R3. that is also single family zoning. And I'd like to point out the only 4-story buildings in Oakwood are low income apartment complexes. Oakwood was downzoned to make it impossible to build low income housing in the neighborhood. So I don't know. I mean, I feel like Venice, because of its historic zoning allowances, is a dynamic community that I like living in. I understand if people don't want a 10-unit apartment building next to them, but I can't see where allowing for some housing diversity in all of our neighborhoods is a bad thing.
Yeah, I hear you, Barry, and your point is well taken. You know, whenever somebody does a 2-minute video like that, it's kind of hard to really represent, you know, the broad diversity of neighborhoods that make up Los Angeles. Obviously, you know, your neighborhood is what it is. My neighborhood is not exactly like that video either. And I think your point is really, to me, underscoring why bills like SB 9 and 10 are off the mark and really wrong, because the approach and the idea that, you know, somebody in Sacramento knows best what works across the board throughout the state for every community. I mean, that, you know, just when you say it like that, it doesn't sound right. You know, your point is well taken. And again, I would say that the key to this is folks like you and everybody, your fellow board members here and the folks that are listening, really sitting down and having, you know, hey, everybody, hey, put your guns down. You know, nobody here is the enemy. Let's just put our ideas together and see what makes sense, identify where our problems are, and have a real frank and honest conversation about what some practical, achievable solutions might be, and see where that goes. And then once you guys have some consensus, go after your local electeds and bring them to heel on that. I think you might be able to make some progress. Maybe I'm an eternal optimist. I don't know, but I appreciate your point, Barry.
Thank you, John.
Anybody else? I think Daph has her hand up.
Sorry, I said, Jeff, we're going to wrap it up with you. And thank you, John.
Sure.
Thanks so much, by the way. This was very interesting. You touched on so many issues. I feel like we could have an entire meeting on 10 different parts of your presentation. I think suffice it to say, in Venice, nobody wants state control, right? And the idea that the state is going to unilaterally decide how we zone our individual neighborhoods is just foolhardy. And I'm an attorney. I've got friends that are top land use attorneys and top law firms, and you know, they all think to a person that these Scott Wiener bills that we keep seeing are just crazy, and you know, so I think we all agree on that. But I've struggled so much with how do we get to the answer, because you know, we haven't had a real discussion in Venice, at least publicly in the Land Use and Planning Committee forum, about our specific plan, our land use plan, or all of this that's coming up. Hopefully we will do that. But I still really struggle with how do we get the units there? I mean, what we've seen in a lot of communities is the single family home and the protection of the single family home has in many communities led to gentrification, right? It has become a barrier to entry into communities for people that can't afford to buy that. And it's true in Venice as well. And so, you know, it's a struggle because obviously we love these charming blocks, and I live on one too. To Barry's point, we have a real diversity of housing stock in our block, which translates into a real diversity of economic and social neighbors, which we love, which is why we're here. But I don't see really what the solution is. I feel like the number of vacancies are artificially high at the moment. I feel like this has been covered a lot in the news. The Wall Street Journal just had a really good article series about, you know, vacancies being artificially high because of COVID, foreclosures being down, and investment funds kind of swooping in. I don't know if you saw the article about Allentown, Pennsylvania, which is, you know, a classic hardscrabble East Coast Rust Belt town. Their investment groups are going in to buy all these single family homes, right? So this is a problem we're facing everywhere, but it seems like it's also ripe for market correction. Right. So some of these things we're seeing with vacancies, foreclosures, et cetera, may not be long term, really. So in terms of our community, I don't know that we have exactly the answer, I guess is the short point. And I loved everything you said. I loved your presentation, but I'm not sure that it actually informs for us what we could do. And I'm wondering, what do you normally see as the solution?
Wow. I wish I had a one sentence answer for that, Daph, because that is what you're saying. That is the challenge. And I think the answer is finding ways to bring folks together. You know, you, as you just said, you, Barry, Alix, some of the folks that, you know, have spoken tonight clearly know, you know, what's going on in Venice, and you have some very specific ideas, opinions, and perspectives on what needs to happen. What you may want to do is add to that some data. You know, there's a lot of conversation now about people not, you know, hey, you're entitled to your own opinion, but not your own facts, right? So maybe see if you can collect some data on vacancies, for example. How many different vacant units are there in Venice and the surrounding area? What are they? Why are they vacant? You know, so we're not talking theory. We can actually drill down and figure out what's going on and what your specific sub-market dynamics are that are driving these vacancies. And then, you know, also look at how many units are planning to come online from new construction. Maybe try to come up with a list of wishes, like, okay, if we had our wildest dream, this is what we would want to see in terms of, you know, this many housing units of this type, you know, this many housing units of the other type, and then see if you can figure out a way to put all that together into some kind of policy document or initiative, and you know, see who would join you in trying to implement that. You know, maybe that's the engineer part of me, but you know, I do believe in solving problems, and I've never met a problem that I can't figure out a solution for. You know, this really is just, to me, it boils down to political will. And you know, all too often, too many of us want to be right, and you know, want our opinion to be the one that's appreciated and respected in the room. And you know, I really appreciate all you guys and the kind words and comments that you shared tonight. But you know, at the end of the day, this is only good if we do something about it. So you know, let's all put our egos down and our agendas and whatever else is distracting us, and really sit down and have a conversation just focused on how do we get results, and be willing to look at everything. And I think if you do that with that kind of spirit, you may surprise yourselves in terms of what you know, finding the answer, or at least making some progress. You know, that's, once we solve this problem, there'll be some other problem that comes up. But we've got to tackle this problem, because I don't know if you guys heard, my 9-year-old walked by a minute ago, but my wife and I have a 9-year-old and a 15-year-old. And, you know, in 20, 30 years, we don't want these guys to be sitting around Zoom or whatever medium of communication they're using and talking about this same stuff. Let's figure this out. We can do it. So, you know, whatever I can do. Alix, I was going to say, I can't share or I can't put stuff in the chat. I didn't see that option, but I will send you via email a few things that you may want to share with your fellow board members and neighbors, and some of that information might be helpful to you guys. But
I will do that, John, and thank you for taking your time. I know you're busy and you have a family, and I hope we can have you come back to Venice and engage in more of this conversation. I think it's super important, and it's really been a pleasure getting to know you over the last couple of months. So thank you.
You as well. And I appreciate,
John, we actually have some interesting projects you may want to stick around for tonight.
All right.
That hit on your issues.
I'll
if you're looking to kill a Thursday night, it's a great time.
I'll keep it on in the background. I appreciate that. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you. Take care.
Thank you for the presentation and the great discussion.
My pleasure. Thank you. Good luck. And we'll be in touch. Whatever I can do to help, you know how to find me.
Thank you, John.